Good afternoon, everyone. Let us start. Remember, we have been learning Chapter 14, Movements of Ocean Water. Today, we shall discuss about tides. Now, let me present my screen. Tides. About the meaning of tide, we also have already learned about it. Again, it is given here. Let us read. The periodical rise and fall of the sea level once or twice a day, mainly due to the attraction of the sun and moon, is called a tide. So a tide refers to periodic rise and a fall of sea level, and it is caused by the attraction, the gravitational attraction of the sun and the moon. Okay, so here just let us see. Let us say this is a coastal area, and so let us see, say this is the normal sea level. So this is the normal sea level, and due to the attraction, okay, gravitational pull of the moon and the sun, so the sea level rises. Okay, here the sea level rises up to here, for example, and again it may fall downwards. Okay, so again it may return here, or it may be here also. Okay, and so this is what we call high tide, and this is, we call it low tide. Okay, and as such, rise and the fall of the sea level is known as tide. Okay, periodic rise and the fall of the sea level once or twice a day is called a tide. And sometimes you may find terms like surges. So what are surges? Movement of water caused by meteorological effects like wind and atmospheric pressure changes are called surges. Actually, storm surges are the big waves generated by these cyclones. Okay, by the when cyclones occur over the oceans. So big waves are generated, and there is a movement of this ocean water horizontally, and that type of wave is known as surges. Okay, and surges are not regular like tides, and okay, see, it is occasional. When there is thunderstorms or tornadoes, or the cyclones, maybe tropical cyclones. Okay, so there may be this generation of waves, big waves hitting the coast, and that type of wave is known as surges. It is like tsunami. Okay, and about the causes of the tide, we also have learned earlier. The moon's gravitational pull to a great extent, and to a lesser extent the sun's gravitational pull, are the major causes for occurrence of tides. Okay, so moon's gravitational pull to a great extent, and to a lesser extent the sun's gravitational pull, are the major causes for the occurrence of tides. See here in this diagram, see, it is due to, in this case, okay, it is due to the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun that we have a bulging of the ocean water. Okay, And here along the equator we have high tide, and in the polar areas we have low tides. Okay, so in this way, due to the gravity of the sun and the moon, there is rising and a falling of seawater known as tide. Another factor is centrifugal force, okay, which is the force that acts to counter the balance of gravity. Centrifugal force, you know, see, the earth is rotating on its own axis, okay, on its own axis, and that is why every object on the earth's surface have a tendency to move away from the surface of the earth, and that is known as centrifugal force. Okay, so together the gravitational pull and the centrifugal force are responsible for creating two major tidal bulges on the earth. And on the other side of the earth facing the moon, tidal bulge occurs, while on the opposite side, though the gravitational pull or attraction of the moon is less as it is farther away, the centrifugal force causes tidal bulge on the other side. So figure number 14.2 tells the same. So here we have the figure number 14.2. okay, so it is here, figure number 4.2 is here. See, here in the first case, due to the gravity of the moon and the sun, okay, the seawater is pulling towards this side. Okay, that is why we have tidal bulge here. And at the other side, okay, so this side, on this side, in this case, we don't have this moon or the sun, and that is why on this side, this centrifugal force is very, very effective. Centrifugal force, you know, say this is the earth and it is rotating on its own axis, and that is why objects on the earth's surface have a tendency to fly away. Okay, that tendency is also there in the atmosphere or in the case of the ocean waters also. So on the other side, okay, which are very far away from the moon and the sun, on this side we have the centrifugal force, very effective. So after combining this tidal force, okay, the gravitational force of the moon and the sun and the centrifugal force of the earth, here we have the resultant, okay, tidal bulges here along the equator. So on this side, due to the gravity of the moon and the sun, seawater is bulging, and on the other side, because of the centrifugal force, it is bulging. So this is the resultant effect of these gravitational pull and centrifugal forces. So this is what explained in your book. Okay. Are you clear? Any question from your side?
Sir, what is centrifugal force?
Actually, see, it is the force, okay, which has on an object which is rotating. For example, see, here, okay, here, let us say just at the end of a thread or rope, okay, just tied one stone, then just after that just try to rotate around you, and definitely this stone, okay, will pull you in different direction. Okay, that force is what we call centrifugal force. Okay, so this is a force generated when an object is rotating on its own axis. That is called centrifugal force, and the earth is also rotating on its own axis, and that is why every object, maybe ocean water or ocean or others, have a tendency to fly away from the earth's surface, and that is known as centrifugal force. You may try it. Okay, just tie an object at the end of a string and rotate it around you, revolve it around you, then that object will pull you. Okay, will pull your hand, and that pulling force is known as centrifugal force. Okay, are you clear or not?
Yes, sir.
And here let us proceed. So I think about this figure number 14.2 it is clear, I think, and so let us proceed. The tidal bulges on the wide continental shelf have greater height. So tidal bulges, that is a rise of the seawater on wide continental shelf, have greater height. What do you mean by continental shelf? See here, let us say this is a coastal area. Okay, on the coast you may find a very gentle slope area, and the sea level may be here, say for example. Okay, and this area from the shoreline up to this area is a very gentle slope area. Okay, is a very gentle slope area, and so this very gentle slope area is known as continental shelf, and we find maximum height of this tide in the continental shelf areas. Okay, this is known as continental shelf, this is known as continental slope. And when tidal bulges hit mid-oceanic islands, that is islands located in the middle of the oceans, become low. Okay, when tidal bulges hit islands which are located in the middle of the ocean have low. Okay, the tidal height is low, and the shape of bays and estuaries along a coastline can also magnify the intensity of tides. When tidal water flows into a bay or into an estuary, okay, then it may magnify, it may increase the intensity of the tide. Bay, you know what do you mean by bay? Anybody? What do you mean by bay? See here, a bay is a water body, okay, which are surrounded by lane on three sides. See here, this is the bay, this is a water body, and here we have lane, land, and lane. A water body which is surrounded by a lane on three sides is known as bay. Okay, so this is what I call bay, and here in bay, okay, the tidal activity is very great, and the flow of the bulging of the seawater is magnified. And likewise in the estuaries also, actually estuary is the mouth of a river where the fresh water meets with the saline water. Say for example, this is a river, okay, and this is the sea. Here we have this sea, okay, and this area where the fresh water of river meets with the saline water of the sea is known as estuary. And here in this area also tidal activity is very great. Okay, the funnel shape bays, as I have drawn you earlier, greatly change the tidal magnitude, that is height of the tide increases, and when the tide is channeled between islands or into bays and estuaries, they are called tidal currents. When the water flows into a bay or estuary due to the this tidal activity, we call it tidal currents. Okay, Just see here, when, as I told you, when there is rising of the seawater, then there will be a flow of water towards the lane, towards the bay, or towards the estuary, and that flow of water is known as tidal currents. Okay. Up to here, any question? Are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then about this tide, we have a very important information. Okay, tides of Bay of Fundy, it's Canada. Let us read. You may see the location of this here. This map shows Bay of Fundy. Bay of Fundy is here. Okay, so this country is this area. This country is Canada. Bay of Fundy is here. Here the tidal activity is very great. So let us read. The highest tide in the world occur in the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia, Canada. The tidal bulge is 15 to 16 meters. The height of the tide ranging between 15 to 16 meters. And because there are 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day, so roughly 24 hours period, that means in a day we have 24 hours, and we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides, means altogether we have 4 tides. Okay, then a tide must come within about 6 hours period. That means 24 divided by 4 is 6. Okay, so a tide must come in within a 6-hour period, and as a rough estimate, the tide rises about 240 centimeters an hour. As a rough estimate, the rising of the seawater is about 240 centimeters, more than the height of a human being. Okay, more than 6 feet. That is 1440 centimeters divided by 6 hours, we get 240. And if you have worked down a beach with a steep cliff alongside, which is common there, make sure watch the tide. And if you have worked for about an hour, then notice that the tides, okay, the tide is coming in. The water will be over your head before you get back to where you started. See, while you're walking, let us say here in the Bay of Fundy, say such type of cliff is very great. And suppose this is the beach and you are enjoying here, a walk here, and you are here. Okay, and here what is mentioned here, if you have walked down a beach with a steep cliff alongside, which is common there, make sure watch the tide. You have to observe the sea tide very carefully. If you have walked an hour, then notice that the tide is coming in. You should observe the tide very carefully, otherwise you may not get the time to return. Okay, so if you have worked 1 hour, then you must be back as soon as possible. That is the point mentioned here. Otherwise, you will be drawn like this. So the water will reach up to here, 240. Okay, 240 centimeters, more than the height of a human being. Okay, and you will not get the place to escape here. You may not be able to climb the steep cliff also. That means you will be drawn in the water. Okay, if you don't be back within an hour. So that is the point mentioned here. And I have some photographs. See here. This is a photograph showing this Bay of Fundy. So this one, the above one shows a low tide condition, and the below one shows the high tide condition. Okay, and we have another scene also. See, this is another side. The above photograph shows low tide condition, totally dry, and below it we have high tide condition. It is flooded. Okay, so this is about Bay of Fundy. Next we have these types of tides. Tides vary in their frequency, direction and movement from place to place, and also from time to time. Tides may be grouped into various types based on their frequency of occurrence in one day or 24 hours, or based on the height. That means we can classify tide on the basis of frequency of occurrence or based on the height of the tide. Okay, so we have the following types of tide. First, we have tide based on frequency, based on the number of occurrence. The first one, we have semi-Duranail tides. Okay. The most common tidal pattern featuring two high tides and a two low tide is the successive high or low tide are approximately of the same height. Okay, this is the most common tidal pattern, and in this case we have two high tides and two low tides is they, and the successive high and low tide are approximately of the same height. And here this graph also tells the same. So the first one, this one is the case of the semi-Duranail. Okay, this one semi-Duranail, and so this, according to this graph, so this is the level of the high tide, this is another level of the high tide having the same height, and this is the level of the low tide, and this is another level, okay, of the low tide, and it is almost the same, okay, in this case. That means, see here, say this is the coastal area, and here let us say this is the level of the high tide, okay, of the first one. Then this is the level of the low tide, and again another high tide. Okay, there may be another high tide, and the level of the second high tide may be up, maybe here, and like this the another, okay, level of the second low tide may be here. That means the height of the tide almost the same, the first and the second one. Okay, the height of the tide of the first and the second one almost the same. Okay, and next we have Duranail tide. So there is only one high tide and one low tide during each day. The successive high and the low tide are approximately of the same height. So in case of Duranail, Duranail means daily. Okay, in case of Duranail there is only one high tide and only one low tide in each day, is given in this graph. Okay, as you see here, this is the case of Duranail 1, and here this is the level of this high tide, and this is the level of the low tide. And next we have mixed tide. The tide having variations in height are known as mixed tide. So in this case the tidal heights are different. These tides generally occur along the west coast of North America and many islands of Pacific Ocean. So in case of this mixed tide, okay, in case of mixed tide, here the level is not the same. Okay, and so in this case, so the diagram is here. So this is the level of this high tide, and this is another level of the second tide. Okay, this is the, okay, the low tide condition, and this is another low tide condition. So here in this case, this level of this low tide and this level will be different. Okay, the first one may have higher water level. That means in this case, let us say this is the level of the first high tide, and then again this is the level of the low tide, and the level of the second high tide may be here. Okay, and the level of the second low tide may be here. That means the height of the tide is not the same. This is what we call mixed tide. Okay. Any question from your side?
No, sir. No question.
Okay, then we have tide based on sun, moon, and earth position. We have another type of classification of tide based on the position of the sun, moon, and the earth. Okay, the height of rising water, high tide, varies appreciably depending upon the position of the sun, moon with respect to the earth. And the spring tide and neap tide come under this category. So we have two important types of tide, spring tide and neap tides, based on the position of the sun, moon, and the earth. So the first one, we have spring tide. The position of both the sun and the moon in relation to the earth has direct bearing on tide height. When the sun, the moon, and the earth are in a straight line, the height of the tide will be higher, and these are called spring tides. And they occur twice a month. Okay, one on the full moon period and another during the new moon period. Okay, so we have a diagram here, spring tide. See here, spring tide. So this is the case of full moon period, and this is another case of this new moon. Okay, see here the position of the sun, moon, and the earth. So this is the sun, this is the earth, and this is the moon. So here the position of the sun, earth, and moon in straight line. And in this case also straight line, sun, then moon, and earth. So this is in the straight line. So this is known as spring tide, and here you will get the highest tidal bulbs. Okay, one in the during the full moon period, another during the new moon period. And next we have neap tides. Normally there is a 7-day interval between the spring tide and neap tides. Okay, normally there is a 7-day interval between the spring tide and the neap tide, and at this time the sun, moon are at right angles to each other, and the forces of the sun, moon tend to counteract one another. And the moon's attraction, though more than twice as strong as the sun's, it is diminished by the counteracting force of the sun's gravitational pull. So in this case, the position of the sun, moon, and the earth is at right angle. Okay, just see this diagram. In this case, here we have the sun, then we have earth and the moon. So here the position is at right angle, and because of that, the gravitational attraction of the sun and the moon is counteracting. Okay, but since the this moon's attraction is more, so we have tidal bulbs here. Okay, and this is for the first quarter moon, and here this is another position. Okay, in this case also, here the position of the sun, earth, and the moon is at right angle, and this tide is known as neap tide. So let us proceed. Once in a month, when the moon's orbit is closest to the earth, that is what we call perigee, unusually high and low tide occur, and during this time the tidal range is greater than the normal. And 2 weeks later, when the moon is farthest from the earth, we call it apogee, and the moon's gravitational force is limited and the tidal ranges are less than the average height. So we have this diagram. Okay, so here this position of the moon is known as apogee, and here the distance is 405,385 kilometers. Okay, so this is the position which the moon is the farthest from the earth, and this position is known as perigee. Here in this case, okay, the distance between the this moon and earth is the closest, and that is why we have this unusually high and low tide, okay, during this time. See this diagram very carefully. And when the earth is closest to the sun, that is position is known as perihelion. Around 3rd January each year, tidal ranges are also much greater with unusually high and unusually low tide. So perihelion, this is on 3rd January here in this diagram. So here in this case, here perihelion is here, 3rd January. Here in this case, the distance between the sun and the moon is the greatest. Sorry, is the shortest one. Is the shortest. Here the distance between the sun and the earth is 147 million kilometers. And because of this, unusually there is high and low tides. And when the earth is farthest from the sun, the position is known as aphelion. Around 4th July each year, and tidal ranges much less than the average. Means the tidal activity is weak in this case. See here, this position is known as aphelion. So it may be on 3rd or 4th July, and in this position, okay, we find the greatest distance between the earth and the sun. Here the distance is around 152 million kilometers, and because of this, we find this less tidal activity. I mean the magnitude is less. And the time between the high tide and a low tide when water level is falling is called the ebb tide. The time between the high tide and low tide when water is falling is called ebb tide. Sorry, is called the ebb. And the time between the low tide and the high tide when the tide is rising is called the flow or flood. Okay, the time between high tide and low tide when water is falling is called ebb, and the time between low tide and high tide when tide is rising is called this flow or flood. And next we have importance of tides. Significance or usefulness of tides. Since tides are caused by the earth, moon, sun positions which are known accurately, and we have the record also, historical records also there, the tide can be predicted well in advance, and this helps the navigators and fishermen plan their activities. The tidal flows are of great importance in navigation, and the tidal heights are very important, especially harbors near rivers and within estuaries having shallow bars at the entrance, which prevent the ship and a boat from entering into harbors. And tides are also helpful desilting the sediments and in removing the polluted water from the estuaries. Desilting means removal of the sediments. Okay, here in this case, here this is the coastal area, and so this is the level of the high tide. Let us say some sediments are here, and when the water is falling down, these sediments here in the continental shelf will be removed, and even the polluted water near the coast also will be carried away. So this is the significance of tide. And about the significance of tide in the harbor, see, I have shown you this photograph earlier also. Okay, when there is high tide here, okay, we can this we can do this loading and unloading of the commodities. Okay, and when there is high tide, these ferries, ships and boats can be moving away. For example, this is the ship here, and when there is high tide, the ship can be moved away very easily, as you are seeing here. And tides are used to generate electrical power in Canada, France, Russia and China. And a 3 megawatt tidal power project at Duranail in Sundarban or West Bengal is underway. So this is an example of the this importance of these tidal activities in generating this power, electrical power. So this paragraph tells the significance or the importance of these tides. Any question from your side? Okay, if you don't have these questions, let us stop here for today. Thank you very